Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's Webinar Wednesday. I'm Tony, the UI and Product Specialist here at MobileSmith. This week's presenter will be Tracy, the Client Success Manager. She will be going over access methods into your app. Just a brief recap of last week. We went over how to design apps in the new look and feel MobileSmith 4.0. Again, this week will be, or today will be, methods of access into your app. So she'll be going over using unrestricted app activation, registration required, HTTP web sessions, and the new Oauth. So that being said, enjoy the webinar, and I'll hand it over to Tracy.
Thanks, Tony. All right, so thanks for joining us. Today we're going to, like Tony said, we're going to go over access methods into your application. I'm going to go over these. I'm going to try to give you some examples of when you might want to use the different types of activation, and then we will take some questions at the end. So when you are creating a mobile app, one of the first things you need to decide is what type of access methods that you're going to use. So I have just made a couple of examples for us to look at, but here you'll see you created the basic information, your project name, and then your access method. There's a drop-down list that you can choose from here. We'll just sort of start with unrestricted and go through all of these. Unrestricted is probably the most used method. So I'm going to go ahead and select that and skip the other stuff and just add that. Unrestricted means that there is no barrier to entry for your end user to use the application. They download it, they open it up, and they're right into the thick of the application. This is a really great way to use the applications if you're going to do like a general hospital app or just some information, informative apps where you're not trying to collect information, there's no proprietary information, and it's just to a general user base. So as you can see, if I go into my unrestricted app here, under my app blocks, I have no access method app block that I need to go configure. So that's unrestricted. The next option that you'll see, there's app activation. So if I go into my app settings here, in this instance I had selected app activation, and you'll see in my app blocks here I have an access manager. So whenever you're going to use app activation, Oauth, registration, any of the access methods like that, you will have an access method app block. You've got your configuration step. Here for access method, what that is doing is it's a very minor barrier to entry. There's like a username and a password for all the users when they enter into the application. They enter it in one time, and that's it. Once they've entered in their code, their username and their code, it's been accepted. They never have to enter that in again. So you have your item name here and your display name. So you can call this, this is what's going to appear on the screen of the header of whatever you want this to do. So I've said enter in your code. You can upload a CSV file if you wanted to that just had the username and password, and that would upload automatically. Or you can go into App Office here and create a few records. It's important to note with the access method that with the app activation, you can have one code that's used for everybody. So I could tell everybody to create an application, first it and say the username is Tracy and the password is test, and everybody could use that. I could also have an individual code for every single person if I wanted to, or groups of people. I could say development, this is your passcode, management, this is your passcode. When I submit the app, I can have just one passcode active, and I can add those as we go along without having a build necessary. If I wanted to, once I've added in some of these, I could come in here and say, okay, I want to make Tracy inactive now because we're starting a new campaign and we're going to have a new one, the Tony campaign, with this password of Tony, and I save that. You'll see in my App Office here now, Tracy is no longer active and the Tony campaign is active. So if anybody wanted to come in, a brand new user, and log in with a Tracy, they could not do that. So that is the app activation. With that, all the username and passwords are stored in the app office on the MobileSmith platform. The very similar method to that is app activation remote. You'll see here your access manager configuration is the same. A little bit different in the configuration here is that there's a URL. This means that instead of when the application launches and somebody enters in their username and password, instead of coming back to the MobileSmith server and saying, hey, this is Tracy and the password's test, is that good? And we say yes or no, we're going to send them to you. So they will go to your URL and we'll pass on, this is Anthony and this is his password, and your server will say, yes, that's great, he can get in, or this is Tony and his password. Nope, not so much, not today. But again, these are one-time activations, and you only have to put those in one time, and the app will be live from that point forward. With the access method here, if it's a URL, you do have the ability to design your phone canvas a little bit. So you can, move your username and password along in your submit, and we're just going to pass that information on to you. App activation, either using the MobileSmith platform or your server, the remote form of it. Those are apps that you just need a slight barrier to entry. You want to limit the user, so it's not maybe general public, but you can just want to have sort of a record of who's not a record, but you want to have the ability to limit who gets into it. Some people are using this as a differentiator. So if they're in a crowded market and there's a lot of, say, apps about shoes, and they want to have a differentiator in their market, they'll say, okay, so here's our app, and this is really great about shoes, but you have to be one of our clients to actually access it and get into the information. So that's one way that you could use either method of those. The next method that we'll talk about is the HTTP web session. When you're doing HTTP web sessions, it's very similar to the app activation. You'll see here the app activation remote. There's a URL where we need to send the data. There's a username and password, and we send that to you. As with the app activation remote, none of that data resides on our servers, and we send that all to you, and your server manages it. With the HTTP web session, what is different about that is than the app activation remote is that your server controls the timeout. So instead of this always being available once they entered in once, it's good to go and they never have to log in again, you can limit it based on your server timeout. So you can say, you know what, after 20 minutes of inactivity, then they have to log in again. And in that case, if the user is using the application, and it's running in the background, they're inactive, they come back, they're going to be taken back to that login screen so that they do have to log in again. Again, with this, you can design your phone canvas, submit, you can change the background, username. Over here, you'll see your toolbox. You have your inputs. You still have your generic tools. So if you wanted to drag an image over, you could drag this image over, put it on here of your logo or something, and that all works exactly the same as it does just normal in the platform wherever else you go. Cancel there. All right, delete that. With the HTTP web session, you do have the ability to, based on those user credentials, send down different information to the different users if you would like. The app HTTP web session, this is really good. It's used mostly for internal apps where it is some very confidential or proprietary information, and you want to be able to limit who gets in and what information is sent. We have one client that has used this and is sending down different information to different users based on their credentials. We're going to talk now about registration. Registration, you'll see here, access method has quite a bit of information that you need to configure. So registration is when you are requiring the user to give you some information about them or agree to some terms and conditions before they're allowed entry into the application. This is a one-time acceptance, so once they go through the process, they don't have to see it again. Once they've registered, it really turns into an unrestricted application. And what you choose to collect from that end user is entirely up to you. You can tell them that you need their email or their phone number or their name or their date of birth, whatever. Some of our clients have them require just that they agree to the terms and conditions, and that's it. So here on your data mapping, this is where you would come in and say, okay, well, I've added, like, I want a name, an email, and a checkbox. That checkbox can be used for, like, I agree to these terms and conditions. If I wanted to, I could tell them I need their birth date. I need whatever information I'd like to collect from them. It is important to note that the more information that you're collecting from people, or the more of a barrier of entry you're putting into using the app, then you will have a drop-off in use. So if you're just using like a general informative app and you're making them register and you're asking for just an extensive list of information, you will see a drop-off in use on that. And just like with the rest of the application, you can drag and drop over whatever fields that you're going to want to collect from them. So I've got their name, email address, and phone number. Okay. So now with the access method, the next step is I get to design my canvas. You'll see here, down here, this is the input page. So I can come over and here are my inputs. I can bring my name over. Again, with this, I can design this however I'd like. I've got the same ability that I do in the rest of the application. So you'll see I can change my placeholder text name, the color, the configuration. I can choose my keyboard, alpha, email, or numeric. I can also make sure that the field is required. Okay. Since it's registration, there will be a submit button in your upper right-hand corner. You don't have to worry about that. And this is the checkbox here that I did as a selector. So that's what this is. If I delete this, you'll see then that my selector here I can bring back now. Okay? And that is used a lot of times when agreeing to the terms and conditions. Registration is used quite often for pregnancy apps because we've got some milestones built around the due date. So the users will input their due date, and then there'll be milestones geared specifically towards those users on what week they are in their pregnancy, and you can enable that for alerts to do, hey, you're in week 3. So that's a different webinar. Registration is also good for if you need to collect people, if you're doing an event app and you need to collect those people that are attending the event, their information. Here in App Office, you'll see I don't have any data here, but as people register for the event or the pregnancy or for whatever information you're requiring for registration, it will be collected here in the App Office, and then you can export that data into a CSV and import that into whatever system you're using to market to those end users. Finally, I'm going to talk about Oauth. Oauth is our latest, our newest access method. Oauth, it stands for outside authorization. And imagine, if you will, when you've opened up an application before and it's telling you to log in and it says log in using your Facebook credentials. This is a method where you can use somebody else to say, yeah, I believe that this person is who they are, and you don't have to have like that HTTP web session set up on your end. Oauth is set up and integrated with our REST services. So if you're going to be using REST calls and you need to have it as proprietary information, you're going to want to use the Oauth to go along with that. We will be discussing REST calls and how that's configured in our next webinar. So Oauth here, again, it's one set of configuration. There's no app canvas to configure. You've got the access name here, your display name. You know, we can call this register. We can call that whatever you want. Here you'll see there's a device redirect URI and a platform redirect URI. These two items are very important because we need to get to your Oauth server and say, here's what our platform is sending and here's what the end user device is. So you're going to need to register these URIs with your platform. If your Oauth provider only accepts one, you would select that here, and you'll notice that your platform client ID is different. So that means that on your end, you would have to set up these URIs like two different projects with your provider. And so this is where, and this redirect URI is where we're going to be sending the information from. Each of these are generated automatically when you choose Oauth, and they're proprietary to your app. You're going to have to find an authorization URL that we send information to and the client ID. And this is something that your IT guy should be able to help you with, or if you're using like Instagram, it's there in their documentation. You have your choice of explicit or implicit. These are also called like server side, and basically it's like, can you keep a secret? So if you choose explicit, you'll see that you have an access URL and your client secret here is configured. So you have to tell us what that secret code is, and we put it in there and send that. If it's implicit, you'll notice that goes away. So explicit, you have your access URL, which is where we would be sending it, and what the secret is, and implicit, we're just going to be sending it to your authorization URL. The scope here, we typically leave that blank. However, if you wanted to, you can be very specific in what that scope is. So like in Instagram, people will put in there, by default, I think it's you only are allowed to repost. But if you wanted to, you could include scope of you're allowed to like posts, you're allowed to post from this app, etc. And that's entirely up to you, and that will also come up when they go to their authorization page. It says, you know, this app is requesting access to your contacts, microphone, whatever, these type of things that would be included there. So then with the Oauth, we're going to send that token every time that we're doing these calls, and you can send it in the header or in the URL. If you send it in the URL, we need to know exactly what is sent as. If it's in the header, we're just going to include that as part of the chain. And then after this is all set up, you would click verify. Now, I haven't set anything up here, so I can't show you that it works. But I have one app set up here with access method. This is Oauth. As you can see, everything is the same. This is set up for Instagram. These are the device URIs, and it's been registered, which is how we got the auth URL and the client ID. And now here on verify, you'll see my Instagram page is picked up. The platform said, yep, you're authorized. Yeah, and this is what it looks like. So if I were to type in my information, I would be able to go into Instagram there. With Oauth, you only, we set it here. We're going to this access URL, and however you have that configured is what's going to appear on the page. So we don't have the ability to change that. That would be on your end to design that page. Oauth is really great to use for a lot of internal apps when you are looking at sending very specific information to users based on their credentials. And a lot of clients that we've seen are using this for internal apps so that they can send information just to their employees. And with that, you do have the ability to manage the timeout of it. So if an employee were to leave the company and they saw the app on the phone, they log in, their timeout has occurred, they go back to the login page, they enter in their credentials, and on your end you said, nope, this employee is no longer here, so they're no longer able to get in and access that information. With Oauth being the newest item on our registration, it is probably the most complex. We have on our knowledge base here, if you go under knowledge base and product updates, MobileSmith version 4.0, there is a section just on Oauth. Here's a document that you can download that covers step-by-step how to set it up and what the different sections mean, and that's a really great resource for you. So, are there any questions about the different registration or the different access methods into the application? No questions? Awesome. Well, then, thank you very much. We will, in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about the REST services. This video has been recorded and will be placed on our Client Success Webinar Wednesday page so that you can go back and look at it at any point. So thank you very much. Y'all have a great day, and we will talk to you in 2 weeks.